When I say shaped by you at the beginning of our intros, I genuinely do mean shaped by you. Everything we make here at Desks and Dorks is shaped by the feedback that we receive, the comments, the suggestions, and the things that we like doing. And one of the comments that we got a bunch about was about Majesty, the Fantasy Kingdom sim. This was from our last video on systems that I believe would be perfect in more RPGs, interesting concepts and interesting ideas that I think belong in new games. In fact, and one of the most humbling things ever, one of the creators of the original Majesty actually commented on the video and asked how I guess we, technically, if I'm counting with the rest of my team, at Desks and Dorks would approach Majesty's patented system of heroes doing basically whatever the heck they want to do. So before we get into that, make sure to like, share, comment, subscribe. We really do appreciate it. In fact, we appreciate it so much, and so many of you commented asking about this particular system that I'm actually going to be making this video in place of our regularly scheduled low-level monsters video. One more quick thing. If you have not yet, you can join the Discord. There is this week left. If you would like to submit your own idea for a low-level monster for me to do the next low-level monsters video on, the winner of that, the submission that I like the best, is going to get a PDF of one of our RPGs. So the link to the Discord is in the description below. Without further ado, let's talk about Majesty, the Fantasy Kingdom sim, and how I would tackle its very intriguing character system. So for those of you unacquainted, Majesty, the Fantasy Kingdom sim was an RTS that was very popular in the early 2000s and has gone on to accrue a pretty, shall we say, rabid cult following, of which I count myself as a proud member. This game had a really interesting hand-painted art style, and again, most compelling of all, other than its interesting, tough-as-nails missions and fun creature designs, it had something called heroes and a guild system. Unlike other RTS games, Majesty required you to essentially bribe and cajole the different heroes. Different heroes had different personalities, and again, I chose this description, or this picture, on purpose, right? This barbarian, for example, is a character who will fight pretty much anybody all of the time, always, whether or not they're going to be in range of dying. Warriors, for example, this one right here, are characters that are going to try their best to defend. Warriors of Discord are very similar to the barbarians, except that they are more likely to flee in the event that they are heavily injured. Every hero in this game has a personality that can be influenced by bribing and rewarding people. Again, this is the compelling aspect of Majesty that makes it so much better, in my opinion, than almost any other RTS that I've played, because unlike other ones, and just like in real life, you have no direct control over your units. They perform just like real people, and sometimes real people make incredibly boneheaded decisions. Again, adding on top of this the fact that a hero, once they are killed, is permanently dead, which means that losing a hero that you like or a hero that does well is a devastating blow to your strategy, and on top of that, a limit. If you can see right here, for example, each building can only hold up to 4 different heroes of the same type or of a special type. We're not going to get into that for too much, but again, just know that every hero, once they're dead, stays permanently dead, and every guild can only hold up to 4 heroes. This means that when heroes make boneheaded mistakes like not buying healing potions, not fleeing from combat, not grouping up to take down a tough enemy, it can be absolutely devastating, and in some cases, the loss of or death of a single individual champion can spell the difference between victory and defeat. It is an incredibly compelling system, and for those of you who have ever, again like I do, occupy a team leadership role or a convention management role, you'll know that sometimes managing people is really difficult, especially when people don't act or perform in the ways in which you expect them to. Again, real leadership, real work is very much like a game of Majesty, the Fantasy Kingdom sim, and that's kind of why it has accrued these fans over the last couple years. But again, let's talk about how we would do this in a game. So I've actually included a couple different ways that you could do this in a couple different types of games, because I genuinely think this is one of the most interesting systematic challenges or systemic challenges that I've ever had as a game designer. And I think option 1 is all about telegraphing our choices. So first we need an example game so we can define its outcomes. Let's call our game Defend the Base. This game works very much like a simple tower defense game, where waves upon waves of enemies will be thrown at us. And again, I'm using this as a description because I want to give you more focus on how the heroes work rather than the overall game system. So just bear with me for a second. In our game, again, Defend the Base, very original title. So all that we're going to be doing is defending our town from waves upon waves of monsters. There are 3 types of activities that our heroes can do within this game, and it's important that we define the outcomes of the game first before we define solutions on how to make our characters perform like real people. Those 3 activities are fighting monsters as they come to try to pillage our town, repairing or rebuilding structures that have been destroyed or damaged in the monster attacks, and then looting dead enemies, essentially to try to get additional resources that will allow us to construct more buildings and hire more heroes. This is the simple gameplay loop that I have constructed, right? 3 simple tasks. I've essentially boiled down the activity of fortress defense to its 3 basic components. Here's the problem. In an ideal world right now, every one of our heroes has a 33% chance to perform any one of these given activities. This can be really aggravating when you know for a fact that heroes need to be able to fight a monster, otherwise, instead of repairing buildings, because the monsters will outdamage the repairs. So they're like, dude, if you just kill this thing, we don't have to do as much repairing. We can get back to it. But again, these are humans with their own priorities. Might be something that they want to do. Or you might be scrambling at them saying, hey, I need you to loot those corpses first before you go fight those enemies, because I need to be able to hire more people, because this is an easier wave of monsters. But again, with a 33% chance of performing any of these activities, that can be very difficult. To borrow from Majesty, I'm going to have in our game Defend the Base different types of guilds. And in fact, I have 3 different types of guilds, right? In each of our guilds, we'll just call them a Fighter's Guild, a Mason's Guild, and a Thieves Guild. Heroes have a predefined personality trait. So for example, heroes from the Warriors Guild are more likely to fight monsters. Heroes from the Thieves Guild are more likely to loot destroyed monsters, and heroes from the Masons Guild are more likely to repair monsters. This is an interesting thing, and this lets us do something that's a little bit more impactful. So for example, warriors might fight monsters more effectively, looters might generate more loot, and what have you. Where this system I think could be really interesting is instead of just tweaking the chances, which is something you could very much do in a simple game design exercise like this one, right? Like instead of a 33% chance, you skew the numbers. So a warrior has a 70% chance of fighting, a 15% chance of building, and a 15% chance of repair. In order to make this really interesting, and I didn't include a slide for this, I'm really sorry, it would be, I think, beneficial to make different guilds offer upgrades for the other guilds. So for example, the Masons Guild could become a Craftsman's Guild and generate more armor or better armor and weapons for your warriors. Warriors equipped with those things will fight more effectively, but in order to fight more effectively, but also fight more often. But in order to get access to that, you must upgrade the Masons Guild. The Looters Guild, because they're looting, might offer special monster scavenged body parts or tools that can be better used to repair and rebuild damaged or destroyed buildings. Again, this forces the player to do a juggling act, essentially, between the 3 different systems, and by burying the use of an additional system into the other guilds, we make it so that you can't just spam Warriors Guilds if you want to go all fight. There are reasonable upgrades for each of the other guilds hidden in a single guild, and that means that the player in this system has to constantly be bouncing between all 3 types of recruitment, and essentially juggling the 3 different types of heroes and guilds in order to effectively survive this game. But how do we get that to work for RPGs, right? I'm an RPG designer by trade. It's what I love doing. I'm a role-playing game designer. It's who I am, right? And how do we get this system in a game where the game master plays as the NPCs and players have perfect control of their actions? And I think this is pretty easy, actually. If you look back at Hirelings, Hirelings had been a part of role-playing games probably since the first edition of Dungeons & Dragons, when a high charisma score meant that you could hire additional people. And the idea of Hirelings has continued to maintain itself as a useful or viable part of role-playing games. Even now, if you've played Band of Blades, you know, for example, that you run essentially not hirelings, but expendable soldiers in this apocalyptic scenario that you're playing through. So how do we get this to work? Well, it's simple, really, and I'm actually borrowing from a video game to help me out with this. If anyone's ever played Final Fantasy XII, you'll know that there is a system where you can actually purchase what are called nodes, and it's almost like coding an algorithm for an RPG character. So you can buy a node, for example, that says heal when an ally is under 20% HP, or attack the highest value enemy. And so while you are manually controlling a single character, what you can do is you can essentially leave your other characters on autopilot. I would like to replicate that system here. When you hire a personality or you hire a hireling, they come with a built-in personality trait as part of our role-playing game experience. For example, this one that I have here is a personality of, let's say, an aggressive paladin or an aggressive holy warrior. So you'll notice the first thing that they're going to do is they're going to attack the closest enemy. You can treat this almost like an algorithm or like a coding system. But again, if there is an enemy closest to them, that's the first thing that they'll check for in their personality. Okay, if there's no monster that's close to me that I can't move to and attack in a single round, what's the next thing on my priority list? Oh, support with spells. These are probably offensive spells or buff spells. But again, if I can't move and attack an enemy in a single action, I will move down in my personality to the next available thing. Okay, cool. I will support with spells. Okay, if I can't support someone with spells, let's say there's no one in range to attack, there's no one that I can support within range of my spells, where is the closest ally that is underneath their maximum value of hit points, or whatever system you would like to use, right? Hit points is generally a pretty boring one. You can play fast and loose with it, but where is the closest ally who needs my assistance? And then finally, if there is no ally, or if there is a weak ally, or if there isn't a weak ally that I can spot, who is the closest person that needs healing? Where this gets interesting, I think, is what you can do with this system as a full-fledged RPG mechanic. Think, for example, if instead of spending experience points on gold or new abilities, what if you could add new personality traits to your hirelings? So, for example, if I wanted this paladin to play a little bit more of a support, what if for a certain amount of my experience or my in-game currency, I can exchange the 4 with the 1, and so now my paladin is a support paladin. It's a support NPC. Again, they're going to attempt to heal first, and they're only going to attempt to attack as their last resort or their last checked action. What this means is that these characters feel far more organic. The game master doesn't have control of them. The players don't have control of them. You already know when you're getting this companion what its values are and what it wants to accomplish. You can even add some additional layers of obfuscation here. For example, like what if you hired a hireling, but you only know what its first 2 priorities are, right? If I'm Buff Brannigan, the gruff and tumble paladin, I love attacking enemies and I love shooting people with the holy light. Maybe we don't know that Buff Brannigan secretly has a soft side. This is also a really cool opportunity for role-playing, and it comes up organically with these NPCs. Again, the role-playing is probably going to be the responsibility of the players, the game master, but the in-combat or the in-game use of those abilities falls right to this check. Full disclosure, by the way, my friend, I made a Majesty-themed role-playing game when I was like 15. This was the system, and it worked gangbusters, by the way, but like 15-year-old Kyle was cooking, man. But yeah, I dug out the old binder, and I was like, I was onto something here. This is pretty good. But yeah, this is what you would do, I think, if you're doing a role-playing game. There's one last system that I want to talk about here before we close out on how to make NPCs really interesting, and I think Gloomhaven, which is another tabletop role-playing game, but this is in fact a tabletop dungeon crawler, does this immensely well, and that's with these decks of monster abilities. So for example, the players at the beginning of a round know what the monster is going to do. In this case, a monster will move. They have a base movement that's not depicted on the card, but they'll move at no additional bonus. And they will attack at no additional bonus, but they'll pull someone towards them. And then this symbol here means that the move set of the deck actually gets reshuffled back in. So if players are trying to figure out what's going on and how to do stuff, their information is going to go away at the end of a round. What this does is it allows players to prepare for the actions of their enemies, and it also allows the players to try to figure out exactly what's going on with every given adversary. What I think you could do is make a deck very similar to this for an NPC. For example, let's go back to Buff Brannigan, the greatest paladin in the world. We can make a deck of cards, essentially 8 cards just like this Wind Demon has from Gloomhaven, and the players know, alright, these are Buff Brannigan's 8-card moveset. And this is a really great way of emulating the kind of free-spirited or free-thinking nature of another person that exists outside the control of the players themselves. So again, I know I included a couple different examples, but I really think these are the best ways to do this in a role-playing game, in a tabletop dungeon crawler, or in just a very interesting tabletop-style game like the Kingdom Rush board game, or like Castle Panic. I think that Tower Defense lends itself very well to the stress of having to manage both the oncoming onslaught and the choices of these NPCs that you can't do a whole lot with. But that's pretty much it. Again, I really appreciate all the comments. We had so many people commenting on that last video about systems that I think should be in other RPGs, about the Majesty system, because either they, like me, had really fond memories of the game or had never heard of it before, and they were like, what the heck? That's a really interesting concept. And it was then, and it remains so now. To the designer who commented, I don't really want to shout out your actual name because I don't know if that's cool with you or not, but thank you again sincerely for making one of the best games of my childhood and indirectly inspiring me to become a game designer. I don't know if my creative trajectory looks the same if it hadn't been for that title. Majesty was a huge inspiration to me as a designer and as just a game player in general. But yeah, that's pretty much it for Desks and Dorks. If you really want to support us, you can get physical copies of our games from our friends over at World of Game Design. If you're more of a PDF person, and I know there are definitely some people who like the PDFs of our games, you can get those over at itch.io. We've actually dropped the price of them because we're doing a promotion with Symphony Entertainment very soon, which is going to be really cool. So in honor of that, we dropped the price of our PDFs. So if you want to pick up one of those, you can do so there. But again, the best way to help us out other than that is to like, share, comment, subscribe. And you guys have been doing that a ton lately. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much. And I will catch you in the next one. Peace.